Canada's first Filipino federal minister arrives carrying a lot of expectations. The tears Rishi Valdez shed as she took the oath as Minister of Small Business in this week's federal cabinet shuffle marked a breakthrough for her and for the Filipino community she represents. It was a profound moment for me to know that I was representing the close to 1 million Filipinos now here in Canada, she told 24newsread.blogspot.com News on Friday. Filipinos are arguably the most politically underrepresented group in Canadian federal politics. A community that, according to the latest census, has 960,000 members has not had a single Filipino-Canadian representative in Parliament since 2004 other than Valdez, who was elected in 2021. Ray Poctacan became the first Filipino-born Canadian to be elected to the House of Commons in 1988 and served in the Liberal government's cabinet. By comparison, Canada's 770,000 Sikhs were represented by 4 out of 40 ministers in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's first cabinet. Prominent Sikhs outside the government include NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and Conservative finance critic Jasraj Singh Hallan. Rishi Valdez has experience in small business, having run her own bakery. She said she takes seriously her opportunity to serve as a voice for a community that is underrepresented. I can tell the community across Canada I'll definitely be advocating on your behalf and I will continue to listen to your needs and bring it up to cabinet, she said. Census data shows Filipino Canadians have a unique demographic profile, said analyst Andre Bernard of Statistics Canada. The Filipino population have lower unemployment rates and lower poverty rates than the general population, he said. Fewer than 5% of Filipino Canadians fell below the poverty line in 2020, compared to over 8% of the general population. But they also have lower wages, said Bernard. They have lower employment income. Filipino wage earners average $26.59 per hour, as opposed to a national average of $33.22 per hour and $31.23 per hour for all racialized groups. Filipinos tend to be overrepresented in certain industries and occupations, Bernard said. For example, over a quarter of women are working in health occupations. That's much more than for the general population. As well, men are more likely to work in manufacturing and utilities than the general population. Filipino immigrants have historically shown a willingness to move to where the jobs are, creating communities such as those that serve the meatpacking industry on the prairies. The way that Filipinos have entered Canada also has shaped the community, said Bernard. Over a third of Filipino immigrants who arrived since 1980 were admitted under the caregiving program in Canada, compared to 3 or 4% for all immigrants, he said. Low representation in the business world. The 2016 and 2021 census revealed that Filipinos ranked lower than any other Canadian ethnic group in rates of self-employment in both the male and female rankings. In June of this year, just 4.9% of Filipino workers were self-employed, compared to 13% of the general population. Self-employment does not map precisely onto business ownership, but it does overlap fairly closely. Entrepreneurs are by definition self-employed, and any self-employed person making revenue over about $30,000 a year typically has to register a business. Jackie Wild owns Tito Boy restaurant in Winnipeg's South End. She said Filipinos don't lack the entrepreneurial bug. Back home, entrepreneurism, being a business owner, is very commonplace, she said. Whether you're a small business owner, maybe you're a farmer, maybe you are like a side hustler doing things on top of your day job. Being a business owner myself, and having witnessed a lot of the obstacles that folks from our community face, it's not easy to start up a business coming from an immigrant community, whether you're a newcomer or even a subsequent generation. Because a lot of our family members, my family included, when they come to a country like Canada, they are in survival mode. They are simply trying to just make ends meet and to be able to pave the right path and future for their children and for their grandchildren. There is a growing number of Philippine business owners in our community. However, a lot of them are just humbly doing the work. They have their heads down. They're just trying to again survive day to day and pay the bills and feed their families. So we don't often hear from them. Wild said it's hard to break into the business world without intergenerational wealth or contacts. If they don't know the communities that they can reach out to, they don't know the resources that exist for them, she said. It really does discourage them from even taking that first step. The Trudeau government hasn't hesitated to implement ethnicity-specific programs to help members of other communities overcome such barriers and break into the business world. Black Canadians can apply for special loans of up to $250,000 under the Black Entrepreneurship Loan Fund. A Black Entrepreneur Startup program offered by the Business Development Bank of Canada provides up to $60,000. The Government of Canada also offers special opportunities for Black-owned businesses to bid for public contracts. Indigenous-owned businesses also have access to startup loans of up to $500,000 and special access when bidding for government business. No such programs or preferences exist for Filipino-Canadians trying to make it as entrepreneurs. Greater needs, fewer benefits. I think in terms of priorities, it was really important for us to ensure that we were starting off with marginalized communities like the Black entrepreneurs, Black women, the LGBTQ+ community, said Valdez. It's far from clear from the statistics why the Filipino community would be denied access to the kinds of programs that were extended to communities with higher rates of business ownership. It was the Trudeau government that insisted on restoring the long-form census when it came to power after the 2015 election, arguing that an evidence-based government needed good data to make good policy. The very next census produced detailed data on the ethnic breakdown of self-employment in Canada. The census results showed that both Black Canadians and members of First Nations were more than twice as likely to report self-employment as Filipino Canadians. Some segments of the Black population were well above the national average. Ethiopian Canadian men had a self-employment rate of 14.9% higher than men who reported their ethnic backgrounds as English, French, Scottish, Irish or German. No scholarships. Help in starting businesses is not the only area where Filipinos have been overlooked compared to other groups. Student Carla Atanasio chairs Pinoys of Parliament, the largest Filipino-Canadian youth leadership conference. It brings some 250 Filipino youth to Ottawa every year. She said access to higher education is also an issue. Tuition is getting a lot more difficult to fund, and students like me often have to find part-time jobs in order to sustain our education, she said. And that results in staying in school for longer and not being able to afford it, and sometimes running out of tuition money to actually help us to go through university. And if we're talking about economic stability, if we're talking about lifting a lot of people out of poverty, I think that should be a priority for the government as well. While there are numerous scholarship funds reserved for Indigenous Canadians and Black Canadians, neither government nor the private sector has shown much interest in creating such funds for Filipino Canadians. We're welcoming a lot more immigrants and refugees, but is there really room for a lot of us, said Atanasio. There's a rental crisis going on. And so if we really want Canada to be as welcoming as we say it is, then we have to work together with our small businesses, with our housing people who are knowledgeable in housing in order to solve this problem. While the government has set aside $40 million to help Black Canadians find housing, there has been no such program for Filipinos. A community closing the gap. Despite the lack of political representation, the lack of government assistance and the relative lack of private sector philanthropy, the Filipino-Canadian community is closing the income gap with the rest of the population and raising its profile in the business world. Atanasio said the Filipino-Canadian community is undergoing reinvigoration and welcomes having a minister in cabinet. We're the fastest growing ethnic group now in Canada, she said. But in terms of mobilization, I think it was only in the last few years that we looked around and were like, wait, we are just as capable and, our stories are worth telling, that we really came together and decided that this is the time for us to step up. She said the community has high hopes for its first cabinet insider. It's different when you actually have your own person representing yourself up there, she said. Valdez said she knows there are many expectations focused on her new role. My hope is that now that I am here, she said, I'll be able to put forward my ideas and recommendations that can better further support the Filipino community.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.
Rishi Sunak defends granting new North Sea oil and gas licenses. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak defended the decision to grant 100 new North Sea oil and gas licenses. The UK government has also said it will support a carbon capture project in the northeast of Scotland. Campaigners said that extracting more fossil fuels from the North Sea would send a wrecking ball through the UK's climate commitments. But Mr. Sunak said granting the new licenses was entirely consistent with net zero commitments. It comes as the party faces internal divisions over its green policies, such as the review over low-traffic neighbourhoods in England, with some MPs calling for a rethink. Mr. Sunak confirmed support for the Acorn project in St Fergus, Aberdeenshire, on the 24newsread.blogspot.com's Good Morning Scotland programme, then later visited the site. It is one of 4 carbon capture projects which will share up to £20 billion of funding. Mr. Sunak said the announcement would support thousands of jobs across the UK. He said granting the new oil and gas licenses was the right thing to do. He said, even when we reach net zero in 2050, a quarter of our energy needs will still come from oil and gas, and domestic gas production has about a quarter or a third of the carbon footprint of imported gas. The Prime Minister also said it made absolutely no sense to import energy supplies with 2 to 3 times the carbon footprint of what we have got at home. He said increasing homegrown sources of energy would improve the UK's resilience, create jobs, and generate tax revenue to fund public services. Mr. Sunak said the government was determined to transition to net zero in a proportionate and pragmatic way. And he also defended his plans to fly to Scotland as an efficient use of time for the person running the country, and highlighted investment in new technologies, such as sustainable aviation fuel. The Prime Minister said, if your approach to climate change is to say that no one should go on holiday, no one should go on a plane, I think you are completely and utterly wrong.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.
German centre-right leader retreats from remarks about working with AfD. The leader of Germany's centre-right Christian Democratic Union, CDU, has rowed back from comments that his party was willing to cooperate with the far-right Alternative für Deutschland, AfD, at a local political level. Friedrich Merz's remarks triggered cries of protest from his own party and raised concerns about the firewall between German conservatives and the far right. In an interview with the state broadcaster ZDF on Sunday, Merz categorically ruled out joining a coalition with the AfD at a national level, but said such a taboo should not apply to local politics. Of course we are obliged to accept democratic votes, Merz said. And if the head of a district authority or a mayor is voted in who belongs to the AfD, then of course you find ways to continue to work in that town. German politicians from across the spectrum, including within Merz's own camp, reacted with outrage, leading the CDU leader to backpedal. To clarify it once again, and I never said it differently, the CDU resolution is valid. There will be no CDU cooperation on the local level with the AfD, Merz tweeted on Monday. Fears however lingered that Merz could in future be open to breaching a fundamental taboo in Germany's politics since the Second World War. The AfD won its first German district council in the eastern state of Thuringia last month, and secured its first mayoral post, in Saxony-Anhalt, at the start of July. Recent polls show the right-wing populist outfit at 20 to 22% of the vote, behind the CDU on 26 to 28%, both ahead of the 3 center-left, Green, and Liberal parties that form Germany's government. The CDU mayor of Berlin, Kai Wegner, strongly distanced himself from the party leader's comments on Sunday evening. What cooperation is there to be had? Wegner said in a tweet. The CDU cannot, does not want and won't work with a party whose business model is hatred, division, and exclusion. The MP Norbert Rotkin, who ran against Mers for the party leadership, warned on Sunday that the AFD knowingly admits and invites extremist forces into the party and called it unacceptable for the CDU to work with it on any level. Across Europe, several conservative parties have in recent years retreated from a prohibitive stance on working with the far right. In Sweden, the nationalist Sweden Democrats function as a support party for the center-right government, while Spain's conservative Partido Popular has formed regional coalition governments with the far-right Vox, and could attempt to form a power-sharing pact after Sunday's national vote. In Germany, the firewall between the CDU and AfD was fiercely protected under the leadership of Angela Merkel. In 2020, her designated successor, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, stepped down as party leader when she appeared to lack authority to stop Christian Democrat delegates in Thuringia from voting with the AfD to oust the state's left-wing premier. Sharing news of Merz's earlier comments in a tweet, the co-leader of the AfD, Tino Kruppala, appeared to hail them as the start of the end of the firewall stance that stopped the center-right from cooperating or deliberately voting with the far-right. Together we will tear down this wall in the states and at federal level, Kruppala said. Merz's interview followed a series of comments that seemed to relax the CDU's strict condemnation of the AfD, which was founded on an anti-Euro ticket in 2013 but has progressively tacked harder right since. After the AfD's district council triumph last month, Merz designated the governing Green Party and not the far right as the CDU's main enemy, and on Friday he described his own party as the alternative for Deutschland of substance.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.
From Amrit Kailash Yatra to Amrit Vathika, know all about Meri Maati Mera Desh campaign. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Sunday announced Meri Maati Mera Desh campaign from August 9 to 15 in the run-up to Independence Day celebrations to honor the martyred bravehearts of the country. Special inscriptions will be installed in Gram Panchayats across the country in the memory of the martyrs, as part of the campaign. The Meri Maati Mera Desh campaign will be launched to honor our martyred brave men and women. Under this, many programs will be organized across the country in the memory of our immortal martyrs, PM Modi said during his latest edition of the monthly radio program Man Ki Baat. PM Modi also said that an Amrit Kailash Yatra will be organized under the campaign during which selected youths from 7,500 Gram Panchayats across India will assemble at Kartavya Path in Delhi with 7,500 urns carrying soil from across the nation along with saplings. While announcing the launch of the campaign, PM Modi said, Amrit Vathika will be built near the National War Memorial by fusing the soil and saplings that would arrive in 7,500 urns. This Amrit Vathika will also become a grand symbol of Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat. With these efforts, we will realize our duties. We will realize the innumerable sacrifices made for the freedom of the country, we will realize the value of freedom. Hence, every countryman must join in these efforts, the Prime Minister said. Recalling the last year's Har Ghar Tiranga campaign, PM Modi urged the people to hoist the tricolour at the houses this Independence Day as well. With these efforts, we will realize our duties. We will realize the innumerable sacrifices made for the freedom of the country, we will realize the value of freedom. Hence, every person in the country must join in these efforts, PM Modi said. Meanwhile, Shailesh Kumar Singh, Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development emphasized the importance of Vasudhabandhan where each Gram Panchayat/village will renew and replenish Mother Earth by planting 75 saplings of indigenous species which can be carried out at the site of Amrit Sarovar or any water body or public places such as schools, Gram Panchayat Bhawans or any place decided by the Gram Panchayat.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.
Most first-time voters understand president's roles, less clear on relationship with government. Singapore, most first-time voters understand the roles and functions of Singapore's elected president, but are less clear about the head of state's relationship with the government, Parliament and the Cabinet, a survey by 24newsread.blogspot.com and Today found. The face-to-face survey conducted with 1,500 Singapore citizens aged 21 to 33, all of whom are eligible to vote in a presidential election this year for the first time, if the polls are held, also found that respondents were less clear about whether the president has the power to change existing laws and the elected president's relationship with political parties. Singapore could see its next presidential election in the coming month or so, with former Deputy Prime Minister and Senior Minister Tharman Shanmugaratnam, former GIC Chief Investment Officer Ng Kok Song and founder of Harvey Norman Asha George Goh having thrown their hats into the ring so far. The Presidential Elections Committee will assess the eligibility of each candidate to stand for election. The last contested presidential vote was in 2011. President Halimah Yacob assumed the role in 2017, after an uncontested election that was reserved for candidates from the Malay community. Her term expires on September 13 this year. President's roles and functions. The 24newsread.blogspot.com Singapore Presidential Election Survey was conducted between May 18 and June 23. It found that first-time voters were generally familiar with the functions and roles of the elected president. A total of 88.4% of respondents knew that one of the roles of the elected president is to safeguard Singapore's national reserves. The majority, or 84.5%, also knew that the government can only spend past reserves with the approval of the elected president. During the COVID-19 pandemic, between 2020 and 2022, Madam Halimah approved on 3 separate occasions the government's access to a cumulative total of $52 billion, $39 billion of past reserves to help protect lives and livelihoods from the impact of the pandemic. In the end, the expected draw on past reserves from FY 2020 to FY 2022 was $40 billion, lower than the initial amount that the government had sought the president's approval for. Most respondents were also aware of what the elected president can do with regard to certain laws. About 81.4% of respondents knew that the president can veto or disagree with the government's proposals on restraining orders under the Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act, if the advice of the cabinet is contrary to the recommendations of the Presidential Council for Religious Harmony. Similarly, 79.9% knew that the president can veto the government's proposals on continued detention under the Internal Security Act, and 64.3% knew the president can do the same if the government refuses to allow an investigation by the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau. The president's powers. The vast majority, 83.9%, of respondents knew that the elected president has custodial powers, not executive powers, which means they can veto or block government actions in specified areas, but they have no role to advance their own policy agenda. Results also showed that most first-time voters knew that the elected president must consult the Council of Presidential Advisors when exercising their veto powers in connection with Singapore's reserves or the appointment of key office holders. More than half of the respondents, or 57.7%, were aware that the elected president does not have the power to change existing laws. But 42.3% were not. Political affiliation. The issue of an elected president's ties with political parties has been a divisive topic among the 3 presidential hopefuls since they announced their intention to run. Mr. Tharman was a People's Action Party, PAP, Member of Parliament from 2001 before resigning from the ruling party and leaving politics on July 7. When questioned about his independence at the official launch of his presidential bid on July 26, Mr. Tharman cited the example of former President Ong Teng Cheong, who was a cabinet minister and even chairman of the PAP for many years before he became Singapore's head of state. He emphasized his independence of mind, highlighting the difference between that and independence from any past affiliation with a political party. In response to questions about Mr. Tharman's stand, fellow presidential hopeful Mr. Goh said a day later that it is difficult for someone to become independent overnight after having been in Singapore's political system for decades. Mr. Goh is best known as the founder of Harvey Norman Asha, which distributes consumer electronics and furniture in Asia under the Australian brand. Mr. NG, another presidential hopeful and the former chief investment officer of Singapore's sovereign wealth fund GIC, has also spoken about his lack of political affiliations. He said Singapore needs a president who is independent of any political party to safeguard the integrity of our institutions. From the survey questions on the president's links with political parties, 65.4% of respondents knew that the elected individual must not be a member of any political party. About 56.3% of respondents knew that a political party can endorse the elected president, while a higher 66.4% knew that the elected president cannot endorse a political party. Relationship with Cabinet and Parliament. The 24newsread.blogspot.com survey also polled first-time voters about the relationships between the elected president, the cabinet, and parliament. In contrast to the questions on the roles and functions of the elected president, where there was a generally high level of awareness, fewer respondents were able to answer most of the questions on the relationships correctly. About 66.5% of respondents knew that the elected president generally takes instructions from the cabinet, the survey found. But a similar proportion, 63.9%, did not know that the elected president does not take instructions from Parliament. More than half, or 57.7%, knew that the cabinet does not take instructions from the elected president, and 51.3% knew that Parliament does not take instructions from the elected president.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.
Labour releases party list for 2023 election. The Labour Party has released its list for the 2023 election, revealing a little changed lineup. The list confirms candidates vying for electorate seats, and, depending on the party vote in the election and the number of electorate seats already taken, determines who can also get into Parliament, based on their ranking. All the current cabinet ministers and the Speaker of the House are either in safe seats or have been given winnable list placings, on current polling. The most dramatic changes include former cabinet minister Michael Wood, who may now be relying on his electorate or a lift in the polls to get back in, and bringing Willow Jean Prime to the front bench. Wood has dropped from being ranked 30th to 45th after exiting cabinet over failures to declare and sell shares related to his portfolios despite repeated reminders. On current polling, Labour could return 43, one News Varian, or 46 seats, Newsub Read Research, putting Wood in danger of being turfed out of Parliament if he fails to regain his electorate seat of Mt Roskill. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins elevated Youth and Conservation Minister Willow Jean Prime to cabinet in February, and she has now been lifted to the front bench, from 18th to 9th. MP for New Plymouth Glen Bennett has been the deputy chairperson of the Economic Development Select Committee, and shoots up from 59th on the list to 29th. The sitting Speaker traditionally does not contest an electorate, and that is true for Adrian Rural-He, who moves up from 24th to 11th, securing his position. However, there are some sitting MPs who will struggle to return given their placement on the list. They include Anna Lorck, 40th, Angie Warren Clark, 43rd, Liz Craig, 44th, and Sarah Pallett, 51st. The highest place on the list for a newcomer is Georgie Danzy at number 31. She contested the Hamilton East electorate during the by-election following Gaurav Sharma's resignation, losing to Nationals' Tama Pataka. Three candidates, Nana Mahuta, Soraya Peake Mason and Greg O'Connor, are also running electorate-only races, relying on winning their seat to get into Parliament. Two new list-only candidates have also been revealed, Nick Ruin and Deborah Rhodes, but on current polling neither seems likely to be voted in. Labour's list. 1. Chris Hipkins, Ramutaka. 2. Kelvin Davis, Te Tai Tokara. 3. Carmel Sepuloni, Kelston. 4. Grant Robertson. 5. Megan Woods, Wigram. January 6. Tynety, Tornga. 7. Aisha Varal. 8. Willie Jackson. 9. Willow Jean Prime, Northland, up from 18. 10 Damien O'Connor, West Coast Tasman, down from 9. 11 Adrian Rurahi, up from 24. 12 Andrew Little, down from 10. 13 David Parker, down from 11. 14 Pini Henare, Tamaki Makora, down from 12. 15 Priyanka Radhakrishnan, Mangakikye, down from 14. 16 Kiran McAnulty, Wairarapa, down from 15. 17 Ginny Anderson, Hut South, down from 16. 18 Barbara Edmonds, Mana, down from 17. 19 Joe Luxton, Rangitada, up from 23. 20 Duncan Webb, Christchurch Central, down from 19. 21 Reno Tirikadine, Te Taitonga, down from 20. 22 Deborah Russell, Newlyn, down from 21. 23 Rachel Brooking, Dunedin, down from 22. 24 Jenny Salsa, Panmurutahu, up from 25. 25 Tangi Yodikara, Palmerston North, up from 26. 26 Camilla Billick, Epsom, up from 27. 27 Tracy McClellan, Banks Peninsula, up from 28. 28 Shannon Halbert, Northcote, up from 29. 29 Glenn Bennett, New Plymouth, up from 59. 30 Venushi Walters, up from 36. 31 Georgie Danzy, Hamilton East, new candidate. 32 Dan Rosewarne, Waymakeriri, up from 51. 33 Nazi Chen, up from 40. 34 Anahila Kanangatae, Papakara, up from 44. 35 Angela Roberts, Taranaki King Country, up from 47. 36 Tamati Coffee, East Coast, up from 39. 37 Ibrahim Omer, Wellington Central, up from 43. 38 Niralivasa, Takanini, up from 48. 39 Tony Boynton, Wairiki, new candidate. 40 Anna Lork, Tukatuki, up from 61. 41 George Hampton, North Shore, new candidate. 42 Rachel Boyack, Nelson, up from 52. 43 Angie Warren Clark, Wangare, down from 38. 44 Liz Craig, Invercargill, down from 42. 45 Michael Wood, MT Raskill, down from 30. 46 Teresa Ngobi, Otaka, up from 58. 47 Helen White, MT Albert, down from 46. 48 Arena Williams, Manureva, up from 53. 49 Phil Twyford, Te Atatu, down from 32. 50 Steph Lewis, Wanganui. 51 Sarah Pallet, Ilam, up from 56. 52 Ingrid Leary, Tayari, up from 54. 53 Limaga Lydia Sosane, Mangery, down from 49. 54 Pariwadi Takato, Bay of Plenty, new candidate. 55 Estefania Muller-Polaris, Wangaparo, new candidate. 56 Fleur Fitzsimmons, Rongotai, new candidate. 57 Reuben Davidson, Christchurch East, new candidate. 58 Nick Ruin, new candidate. 59 Fizito Solomon, Tamaki, new candidate. 60 Mark Hutchinson, Napier, new candidate. 61 Narissa Henry, Pakuranga, new candidate. 62 Myra Williamson, Hamilton West, new candidate. 63 Oscar Sims, Auckland Central, new candidate. 64 Aladdin Al-Bustanji, Taupo, new candidate. 65 Gwendolyn Keel, Port Waikato, new candidate. 66 Carrig Singh, Botany, new candidate. 67 Emma Dewurst, Kaikara, new candidate. 68 Zulfikar Butt, Rangitaikiai, new candidate. 69 Ben Sanford, Rotorua, new candidate. 70 Simon McCullum, Southland, new candidate. 71 Guy Wishart, Kaiparaki Mahuranji, new candidate. 72 Deborah Rhodes, new candidate. 73 Jamie Toko, Waikato, new candidate. 74 Luke Jones, Selwyn, new candidate. 75 Beryl Riley, Coromandel, new candidate. 76 Ethan Reel, Waitaki, new candidate. Electorate only. Nana Omahuda, Oraki Waikato. Soraya Peak Mason, Te Tai Haoru. Greg O'Connor, Aharayu.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos. Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.